Welcome to Mediumship Moments with psychic medium Kim Dorham. Join her as she shares her personal journey with mediumship, connects with your loved ones, and discusses topics dealing with spirituality.
Hi, thanks so much for joining me today. I am Kim Dorham, second gen psychic medium. I have this podcast, Mediumship Moments. You see it right there. And I sit here and talk with you about different subjects of spirituality, whether it's, how do you connect with your angels? I've talked about the cases that I've worked on. I've had guests with me that deal in all realms of spirituality. But today I wanted to talk about grief and what that looks like, especially through the lens, if you will, of a younger person. And you're like, Kim, what's young? Don't hate. Mid 20s to early 40s, shall we say. And yes, that's midlife. Don't, for all those people that are early 40 something. So I wanted to talk about that today and how you can support your family or friends going through this process. Now, let's talk about the stages of grief, right? Psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross actually coined the phrase, the 5 stages of grief. Fun fact, she was a nurse before she became a psychiatrist. She, in 1969, published a landmark book, quote, on death and dying, where she introduced those stages. So, as a nurse, I had studied that. Many healthcare professionals study the 5 stages of grief. Grief itself is the either physical, emotional, or spiritual loss of something. You could grieve the loss of a job. You could grieve the loss of a pet. But today I wanted to talk about grief as it represents the loss of a family, friend, a colleague, a person, if you will. So in that book, she looked through the lens of grief, through the lens of terminally ill patients, and also the effects on its family and the professions that care for them, right? So let's talk about these 5 stages. The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Now, these stages are fluid. They change. You could go right into denial, skip anger, boom, go right into bargaining, and then regress back to anger. It's dependent upon the person. It's dependent upon, I've seen this in different ethnicities. How they grieve is different. Spanish, the Mexicans, they have Del Muerto, the Day of the Dead, that they celebrate those loved ones who have passed. And so, again, grief is fluid. It changes based upon the person, the circumstances, and also the ethnicity, their cultures, if you will, factors that change how people view this. So let's get into, if you will, the first stage, right? And that's denial. And I'm going to share some stories and insights about, like I said, all of these stages, and try and give you some peek behind the curtain, if you will. So again, this is through the lens of somebody who's 25 to early 40s. So when we talk about denial, right? Let's say and I'll throw a big umbrella. Let's say they get a cancer diagnosis. Cancer does not mean you're dying in the sense that you will cross. A lot of cancers, or even ailments, I can think back in the early 80s when AIDS pronounced. And now, 40 years later, there's a vaccine that's burgeoning. We're on the cusp of actually curing, if you will, AIDS. So a lot of cancers, depending on what organ it affects, and obviously they stage different cancers. But again, I'm seeing an uptick in my, if you will, clients that sit with me and the angels I'm talking with, the family members. I'm seeing a lot of colon cancer in mid 30-year-old guys. I am seeing skin cancer, 30-year-old women. So again, cancer does not mean that you're earning your wings. Different cancers, different treatments. But I am seeing an uptick in younger people with cancer diagnosis, which is why I wanted to talk through this lens, if you will. So again, young person diagnosed, will use the umbrella of just cancer. So how are they going to process this information, right? So when they have this first stage and it hits them of denial, and you're like, they start to become numb. They can't process the information. And It's interesting, some people stay denial all the way through. Typically it's a temporary defense mechanism, if you will. And hopefully they, with support of family and friends or therapist, love my therapist out there, will get them the tools, give them the tools to be able to manage their grief. And so in denial, right? They have an emotional detachment. They don't want to talk about it. It's as though it doesn't exist. So they can't process the information. They're numb, an emotional detachment, if you will, over it. They start to normalize the behavior, kind of make fun of it. Again, all of these are coping mechanisms. And, you know, why does this occur? The shock of it and the overwhelm. Why do they distance themselves and don't want to talk about it? And avoidance, if you will, over it, and emotional distance. It's a self preservation type of response. And so it's a coping mechanism, as I said. So again, getting a counselor involved in the early onset of somebody's diagnosis of cancer, huge, 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 huge. That support system will then also help the family members or their colleagues and friends. Um, you know, I've had situations where people are like, oh, um, where's Tyler? He's not showing up um, at the gigs anymore to play bass. He had a cancer diagnosis, stomach cancer. And it's like, I don't know, I didn't hear from him. I don't want to bother him. Bother them. Stay connected to those people that are part of your tribe. The worst thing you can do is treat somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer as a pariah, a leopard, that they have this disease, that I don't want to be around them. I can't be around them. Text them, send them a meme. How you doing, buddy? Don't tell somebody, call me if you want to talk. No, 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 no. Stay involved. Okay? Especially with the younger people. And again, I hate to, but the worst thing you can do is kind of alienate them. And they'll self alienate as that coping mechanism, but stay involved, right? So then let's talk about anger. Now, and I'll just touch upon it real quick if I can about the denial. In my personal life, had a situation where a family member was in denial over a diagnosis and never wanted to talk about it, never brought in the support system, and it delayed treatment for the person going through that process. And it's frustrating as a healthcare provider to see that happen. You try and support them as much as you can. You don't want to overwhelm them. But the last thing you want to do is really delay treatment, because it can obviously impact greatly the outcome for that loved one. So let's go on to stage 2, right? Anger. Son of a, so when a young person is diagnosed with this life altering diagnosis, and again, the blanket of cancer, what do we do? There's feelings of irritation, outrage. They may be throwing things. They're directed at themselves. They're angry at themselves. They're angry at you. They're deflecting and out and lashing out at you or healthcare providers over this. Their friends, and a couple of common behaviors or feelings. It's like, why me? Why me? Why me? You know, I'm a good person. I go to church. I do philanthropy. Why me? Anger at God or whomever they pray to. They mask their emotions, which happens a lot with the 25 to early 40s. And I use that umbrella over expressing their anger. And, they're annoyed that they have to, let's just say they're annoyed that they have to take the trash out. And you're like, they're living at home with mom and dad, and they're annoyed they have to take, well, I have cancer. There's more important things. And I use that as just a dumb, example, if you will, like trivial matters. They get frustrated over trivial matters. Taking out trash is like, yeah, don't you understand? I have cancer. I don't need to take the damn trash. Again, this frustration a lot with the younger people. And again, this is fluid. It does work with people who are older, but again, I'm looking primarily through that lens. Is the lack of self control and independence, and this is huge, 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 huge with younger people, with anyone. This lack of you're going to be told what treatment you have to go to, when you have to be there, what, like there's not can I, it's you will. And or just a lack of control over their own body and their own destiny. So that's again where the short temper comes about over that lack of control. Now, physically, how it manifests, a lot of times, and it comes into GI issues. You know, the stomach is the brain of the body, and they'll often have upset stomachs, issues like that. And really, that's the manifestation of the fight or flight that's occurring within their body over this diagnosis. So, bottling up emotions also could be the other way instead of flying off the handle, you know, over it, which obviously has a negative effect upon the relationships with their family and friends. So, how do you support somebody in the anger stage? Listen, I'm a big proponent, and this is going to sound crazy, but go thrifting. And you're like, for what? What do you mean thrifting? Get some plates. Get some plates. Yep. And you're like, well, what the hell are you going to do with the plates? I've had people, and I've told them to do this, to be able to throw something and break it. Now, I am not saying that physical violence in some way is a good energy releaser, but it has worked where you go out and you get, I don't know, you buy a box of old dishes and you take them to a place where they can just throw them. And you're like, okay, I'm not saying leave a mess. You'll clean them up. You know, a lot of those places that have concrete up against a wall, they found places to do it. And I won't go into exactly where they were, but, and they said, being able to throw those damn dishes and get out some anger, hell yeah, it worked. It helped. It helped. The finding of the outlets, another healthy way, over that could also be music or art, creating something. Remember when I talked about energetically using that creativity? Very important. Whether they, like, I play guitar badly, pick that up. I use that for healing, right? So I recommend that you maybe learn something new and use that as an outlet for that. Okay. Again, therapist, totally and truly amazing people that help give you those tools to start to manage the anger stage that you're going through, stage 2. So when I talk about this, and you know, the book is amazing that Kubler Ross wrote. Think about that in 1969 to start to give us a look through this. I mean, 69, that's not, I mean, you know, Gen Xers out there, I'm just saying, it's not that long ago. So now after stage 2, we go into stage 3. Then again, we'll just do this chronological, but it doesn't mean that it actually follows that. Remember that it's fluid. So bargaining, right? It's going to be the kind of like they've moved from the anger of, let's say, God or someone, of the diagnosis, and they, stopped dwelling on that to shift from the anger to the bargain. Okay, so I deserve this. What did I do to deserve this? But more importantly, so they can. How do I put this? There's an attempt to find hope, right, over what they're about to go through, and and that emotional angst that they have. So it's kind of like, if only I went to the doctors for that physical and I followed up. Like I had a CAT scan and they saw a little something and I was like, it's nothing. It's nothing. We're busy. I've got young kids. I just started a new job. If only, you know, there's also, and this is interesting that I found because usually kids go through the magical thinking stage, the white beard and the red suited guy at Christmas, magical thinking. And it seems that younger people go through that, and I'm even with, and even elderly go through it with the belief over that they can change the course of this disease. Or, and again, I'm all about positive thinking, but there was like, if I did this, then I'll do this, and it's semi bargaining with the semi bargaining with the acceptance. Like, if I do this and then that, and I'm not saying just because you have a diagnosis, it's the fate has been sealed. It's just the way that they start to process the information. So they go out of that magical into blaming. They can also blame. Damn it, if I didn't go on that trip with the family and I made myself a priority like I wanted to, and again, so they may talk about also alternative explanations. A lot of people over the bargaining go on, and I recommend get 2, 3 opinions. They say it's, and no offense, I love my doctors who are clients, but you practice medicine. And I say this because you haven't perfected it. Through research, it evolves, right? So get a second opinion, get a third. But they sometimes will go through alternative treatments. Off to Peru because of a plant or an herb that they make a tea that they've had some positive results, limited data on. I'll just say that. But they go on for, the whole thing is this wishful thinking in the third stage of bargaining. Absolutely. And, but there's also with the bargaining, you're going to start to see this in a young person. It's interesting how it manifests over loss of their future and their dreams. Depending on the diagnosis, it could be like, I guess I'm never going to have kids. That's a big one for a lot of people. I'm not going to get married. Uh, just that loss, the bargaining and the semi acceptance of their future. So the third stage is multifaceted over how young people deal with a devastating diagnosis. So let's go on to after the bargaining, stage 4, and let's talk about depression. Now, I've seen depression in stage 1. I've seen depression throughout uh, these stages of grief. It's just the sadness, the loss of interest in life, or things that brought them joy. They also start to maybe verbalize thoughts of signing their own book. And so, it's just this low vibrational mood. Now, there's irritability, there's hopelessness, there's anxiety and worrying about the future. Again, you need to be a part of your loved one's life, whether that's family or friends, checking in. I have a saying, starve a cold, feed a griever. And if they're grieving the loss of their future or the loss of a job or, you know, make them that soup, bring it over. And even if it's not a good day, leave it on the porch and just text them, say, I thought I'd give you a warm bowl of a hug. Those little acts of kindness are the things that, how shall I say, have impacted people, that their loved ones who are here on the physical plane, when they come and sit with me, if this person earns their wings and crosses over, do you know they bring those things up, those acts of kindness that seemed mundane or just, not a big deal, that they shift their energy, and it's meaning it meant so much at the moment that they continue to hold on to it after they cross. But here on the physical plane, you should, acts of kindness. I, you know, I've had friends battling cancer and chemo, their feet get cold. So getting them warm, snuggly socks that are loose fitting and not the damn ones we give you at the hospital. No offense. They serve a purpose, but those are important. Lozenges, because their mucal membranes get dry. I know a lot of people like freezer pops because of that. Bring those over. Stay connected with your loved ones, with your family, with your friends. So I talked about the sleep pattern changes in their behavior. You could have, they're crying a lot. Don't treat them like a pariah. Be there. Show up with a box of tissues and said, you know what? I thought it'd be a good day for a cry fest. Put on a sad, sappy movie and cry. Cry. So, you know, Those things are important for the support system that I mentioned to you, especially when they're in stage 4 depression. Okay, because it's a difficult time for them, and that's when they require more support, more support, more love, more support. So let's move on to stage 5. Kubler-Ross called this acceptance. And the acceptance with a young person, again, with I'll say a cancer diagnosis, just an umbrella, not saying all cancers, is that she phrased it, the coming to terms with this diagnosis, that they, instead of focus on the illness, they focus on the new normal. There's a shift that occurs. And it's more of a kind of like they start to, how do I put it? They gain better self-control. They take the reins back over in their life. Okay. And self-compassion and resilience. They get like this, okay, damn it, I got cancer. All right. All right. And there's a burst of energy and sometimes even with the acceptance, whether they accept to fight it, accept the terms of it, it's just an acceptance. Again, this is an umbrella. It is not, and I gotta say this, acceptance is not the giving up stage. It's not. Remember, I said acceptance could be fighting or accepting where they are in the continuum of their disease and how to live their life fully at that time. That's the important part. So making meaning over their life. And they actually shift their focus to the future for however long they're here, what they want to accomplish, things they want to do. It's not quite a bucket list, folks. It is just, there's a deeper meaning and appreciation of their life and their families. And that's why I'm saying stay with them, stay connected. Small things mean huge, just a huge heart, the huge healing of the heart over those small things that you do. So what would it look like, when they're in that stage of acceptance, as I talked about with that, right? They talked about the future, the increased hope, energy, and setting boundaries. They may actually at this phase tell you no, like you want to come over with a bowl of soup or you want to play cards, and they have the power to now say no. And you should celebrate that. I mean, boundaries are good in everything. So if they tell you no, it's not a good, it's all right. It's perfectly fine. I applaud them taking back control of their life and setting those boundaries. And they also start to, like I said, positive moments with family, little Kodak moments. Maybe it's watching that sappy movie that they love to see that you've watched 30 times and they enjoy that. Maybe it's taking a walk at the park and just sitting on the bench and watching the babies play the playground and just laughing and reminiscing. Whatever that is, carve out those little Kodak moments with them. So I have walked you through the 5 stages briefly over grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So I often tell people I don't want you to sit with me to work with a medium before 6 months of your loved one earning their wings, because I need you a little bit further along that continuum of grief. Grief is like a cloud when you work with a medium. For me, I can speak. It's like this cloud. And it's not the first 3 months, it starts to, you're like, oh my God, what did I say last, you're just going through the motions. You're not there altogether physically, emotionally, or spiritually. So there starts to become that for the loved ones who sit with me, that the grief starts to happen with the lifting between 3 to 6 months. 6 months, I can tell now. I've had people sit with me. I can tell right away if you work with a therapist for grief counseling. Absolutely. Because those that haven't, especially when they've had a loss of a child or a partner and parents, is that they stay in the anger stage. Yeah. So it's not only the person with the diagnosis, it's the family members. And when you're still stuck in anger, well, that's a lot of energy. You don't have the tools to manage the grief that you're going through with the loss of a loved one. And energetically, it's a lot of work for the medium to get through there. And I need you present. I need you present energetically to work with you. So, as I often say, I sit here and talk about, so keep that in mind if you're looking to book with any medium. All right. I want to give you a mediumship moment that deals with grief. So I had a client reach out because she has an appointment with me in 26. And unfortunately, she won't be on the physical plane at that time. So, and I've done this before with clients. I reached out and I wanted to talk with her. Some people want to talk with me about what that journey looks like on the other side. And sometimes I can just give them a peek when I put my foot in the door, when I can chat with the other side. I'm there to listen. And this woman was accepting of where she was. She was in stage 5. She had weeks, maybe some months here on the physical plane. And she'd like to give the appointment to her son. And I said, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. But again, I'll work with him to get him to that 6 months point if I can. And she was concerned about her son. They had lost connections. He's in a different country. He's difficult to get a hold of. And so I listened to the angst and the anxiety that she had over that. And then during that conversation on the phone, someone from the other side came through, a brother-in-law who had crossed. And he came forward to share some memories, to let her know he'll be right there with his hand to help her over, show her the ropes, if you will, get her set for her first set of wings, get her off to Angel Boot Camp, throw the party, the whole 9 yards. He also had messages for his wife, which is this client's sister, who's still on the physical plane. So why I bring this up, that mediumship moment, is that through this client having booked a session, she's now at the last stage, of grief, and she's in acceptance of her diagnosis, and that a loved one came through to help her heal and hopefully reconnect the father, the mother, and the son before she earns her wings. So, as always, I thank you for listening to Mediumship Moments. And as always, I say, keep chatting with your angels because they can hear you. Hi, everybody. Today's episode on Mediumship Moments was brought to you by Erica Cosgrove. Now, she is a realtor, she's a broker, and a salesperson at Innovate Realty. That's in Mullica Hill, New Jersey. So whether you're looking to buy or sell or even invest in real estate in the South Jersey area, Erica's the person you should call. And how you can get in contact with her is give her a ring at 856-630-0748. That's 856-630-0748, Erica Cosgrove. And let her know Kim Durham sent you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time for another episode of Mediumship Moments. If you enjoyed this episode of Kim's podcast, check her out on Instagram and TikTok at Kim Durham Medium.